Late one night in 2013, Teachable's founder and CEO Ankur Nagpal put the finishing touches to what would become the predecessor of Teachable. A recent graduate of UC Berkeley and the newest resident of New York, Ankur had been instructing a course in marketing created through another course platform when he decided that he could build something better, something with more customization tools and a more profitable payment system. It was called Fedora. And as soon as we opened for business, we started welcoming scores of experts in feng shui, publishing, cake decorating, playing the handpan, email marketing, coding, and so much more, ready to craft their knowledge into beautiful courses. Just 2 years later, our team of one in a studio apartment in Williamsburg had grown to a team of 15 coders, marketers, and finance experts in an office in Manhattan. Valued at $8 million and growing each day in signups and knowledge, it was time for a new name. And Fedora became Teachable, and the rest is history. Or maybe the rest is just beginning. Today in 2020, more than 100,000 instructors have joined Teachable and transformed their knowledge into world-class courses that have earned more than $500 million to date. As for the future, well, that's what Ankur is here to talk about. With the launch of our fresh new brand, Teachable's next chapter is about so much more than a fresh coat of paint. We're expanding our tools to help creators sell more than just courses, like their time as coaches. And Ankur is here to share more about his big picture vision for the knowledge economy. So welcome to this special season finale episode of Everything is Teachable.
Welcome to Everything is Teachable, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes to learn how everyday creators have transformed their skills and passions into online courses and businesses. To introduce this week's episode, here's your host, Melissa Guller.
So Ankur, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Same. And obviously your interview is a little different from the standard episodes with course creators, but I'm not sure. Typically, yes. I think we're going to have a good time. I'm not sure if many listeners actually know this, but you used to teach. So to start off, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience as an instructor?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ankur. I'm the founder of Teachable, but I only started Teachable because I was a course creator myself. A buddy of mine, Conrad, and I, we started teaching a little bit in person at General Assembly, a little bit on this marketplace called Udemy. We don't talk about that much over here. But we realized that like online education was sort of rising. And as a creator, I had a course on online marketing, saw the potential behind it, but felt very constrained by what the platforms offered us, and then sort of built Teachable first for myself and Conrad. So it's literally a side project that we built for ourselves, found a little bit of utility, got some sales, and then a few months in realized that this could be something useful for a lot more people.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about feeling constrained, what were some of the maybe challenges or opportunities that you saw early on that did eventually evolve into the business idea for Teachable?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've always run businesses for most of my life, right? And the way I run a business generally is I'm like addicted to metrics. If I hit a certain number, I want to do more and more and more. And so when we had our course on Udemy, we hustled and managed to get to like, let's call it $2,000 or $3,000 a month in sales. But it really seemed hard to go beyond that. Like no matter what we did, we kind of hit that ceiling. And when you looked in further, the reasons for that were one, Udemy owned our audience. So like when we would work hard to like bring a new student to the class, they would then get cross-sold to other courses. So it was very hard to make more money from existing people. Because of that, ads didn't work since, we weren't making that much money per student. On top of that, Udemy took 50% at the time, which I found and still find completely insane. But also they discounted your courses very frequently at like 70, 80, 90% off. As a result, we were selling, hundreds of $10 courses, being like, look, something is working. People are taking these classes, but there's no way we can scale this business. So we built the first version of Teachable. It was called Fedora at the time, just as a logical extension of that. We're like, how about if we, have the same courses? It's on our website. We keep 100% of sales and we can charge a more reasonable amount. Thus, Fedora was born, and 6.5 years later, here we are.
Yeah, the rest is history. Yeah. And I think you point out something that has always been something we talk about at Teachable, which is that we want our creators to own their knowledge and to really be able to support themselves by sharing that knowledge with others, which will be probably the theme of the whole episode. Since starting in 2013, though, you've obviously seen and met tons of great course creators. So what do you think are some of the qualities that those successful creators have in common?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things that differentiate the creators that do really well from the creators who sort of don't. And I mean, the basics, the first one, which I'm going to just gloss over for a second, is getting content done. The biggest reason people don't succeed on Teachable is because they still haven't actually published a course. So I'm going to work on the assumption that we're talking about people that have a published course. There's a few things that result in a successful creator. One is being able to have a large or have access to an audience, generally through some kind of channel. Everyone has a different channel. It could be a podcast, it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, it could be YouTube. But having an audience is definitely one factor, and having a large audience makes it a lot easier. The second one is what I call audience topic fit. It's really like, do you have a topic that the audience is interested in buying? And like for instance, if you're a stand-up comedian and your audience like is here to listen to you do comedy, your audience topic fit is going to be pretty weak. But on the flip side, if you have like makeup tutorials or whatever, and people are already watching that, they're going to be willing to pay you for the course. So that's the second thing. The third thing is what we call the offer at Teachable, which is like, do you have a compelling outcome that someone can reach for a specific price point, and does that resonate with the audience? That's super, super, super important. One of the quickest ways we can help people make more money is actually by improving their offer, which is either changing what the outcome someone achieves is or what the price point is. And finally, and the last point is sort of what separates people within the top 1% really is like, how successful is your course at taking people to the outcome? Because we find that when people actually do that, they end up telling their friends about it. And that really is what separates like sort of, the people who make, let's call it $100,000 a year and $1 million a year.
Internally, we talk about the outcome a lot, or the transformation. But if people maybe haven't heard that before, why do you think focusing on the outcome is so important?
Yeah, I think the outcome is ultimately the simplest way of thinking about what an online course is, right? Like very meta question, like what is a course? At Teachable, we talk about a course being a shortcut to an outcome, which is, what is the one promise your product has? What is the one thing it will give people if they succeed? And we find that makes a lot of the secondary decisions super easy, because everything then distills down to a single outcome. So whatever a course is, you can always figure out what is the one thing someone gets, and just working backwards from that makes everything simpler.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to think about, what does somebody gain? Like, they're not buying you because they like your course and they want to take a bunch of videos and spend more time staring at a computer. Like, they want the thing that you've achieved, or the thing at the end of the road.
Yep, absolutely. It's like the cheesy fitness commercials, right? Like, people are not buying like working out. They're buying the 6-pack abs or whatever. And that's what your course is, right? Like, what is the after picture of this transformation? Ultimately, like, as a creator, everything distills down to that. What is equally interesting though is like, you can be pretty successful without even getting people to an outcome. It's really the difference between good and great is where what percentage of people succeed matter. Because we found that like, if you ever get someone to the outcome they paid, they're not going to shut up about it. Like, they're literally going to talk about it with every single person who cares to listen. And that is sort of where the magic happens, is when like you've changed someone's life and they are your best marketing channel. Yes, you can do ads and podcasts and all of that, but there's nothing like a true promoter whose life you've ultimately changed.
I think that's really important, because on the other hand, if you can't get anyone to an outcome, no amount of marketing is going to solve that problem forever.
Yep, it's a leaky bucket. You'll get people to buy initially, but like, it's just less efficient because you're going to get no organic sales. Like, you have to always learn to sell no matter what, but to really scale, you want some percentage of your sales happening organically. And if your course or outcome sucks, that's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Kind of along the same lines, we talked about what sets successful creators apart, but where do you think most people fall short, or what are some pitfalls that maybe early stage course creators run into?
I think the biggest one is frankly not getting it done, like being in this like analysis paralysis where you want to get a course done, it takes a bunch of work, so you sort of keep like iterating and you like record it and then you listen. And I did this too, right? Like, I would like record like a lecture, then I'd come back to it like 3 days later and be like, this sucks. This is the worst lecture in the world. Why would anyone ever listen to this? Then I would re-record it and then kind of repeat this process over and over. And as a result, a month would pass and I wouldn't have anything out there. The way I solved it was like by setting a really hard deadline to myself where I'm like, you know what? On Tuesday, this goes live and I got to work backwards. And if I'm unhappy with it, I'll come back and I'll re-record it later. And the reality is I never did end up coming back and re-recording it. But just that sort of discipline of getting it out there was a very, very big thing that like a lot of people get stuck at.
It's funny that you say that because I think almost every single guest that's come on the podcast, in the end, I ask them, what advice do you have for course creators? And I don't have the exact metrics, but almost all of them say, just do it. Just get started. Don't wait until it's perfect. Don't wait until later.
I thought I had differentiated advice, but okay, let me try and think of differentiated advice then.
Well, while you try to think of something, though, I do think it's noteworthy that unprompted, all of you said the same thing. I think sometimes it's not that the advice or the teaching has to be so novel, but it's your approach. Kind of the same thing for courses. Like, you're not going to be the first person to teach fitness, cooking, marketing, whatever it is. But, you know, you had your own answer. Your answer didn't sound like everybody else's. So I think it's still good advice.
Yep. No, I definitely think it's 100% true. The other thing I tell people is like, try and find your specific angle. Like the internet is such a massive place that a lot of things that you think are kind of like minority niche topics are actually pretty big. One of our most successful creators of all time, like literally right up there amongst people that have been most successful in the last 5 years, teaches Facebook ads for fiction authors. And you would think that's a very specific topic. And I know you've had him on on the podcast as well. But that's a very specific topic. And a lot of people would think that's kind of like this cute niche topic, might have a few people, but no, it's one of the biggest products on Teachable of all time. So similarly, like whatever people's topics are, I would find a way to kind of make it a little bit more specific, a little bit more narrow, because just a natural tendency, at least I have, is to underestimate the size and scope of the internet. And I'm frequently surprised that there's, you know, tens of thousands of people just as weird as you are that like want the same thing. So I would definitely recommend people kind of niche down. And the final thing I also keep repeating like a broken record all the time is like probably charge twice as much as like you're comfortable charging up front. Because the other thing a lot of people get wrong initially is they charge way too little, and with time sort of keep moving their price up.
Mm-hmm. Two really great pieces of advice. And if anybody does want to listen to that episode with Mark Dawson, I believe it's episode 3, but you can also just go to teachable.com/podcast and find it there. I do have one more question that actually came from a fellow Teachable employee. She wanted to know, what are some funny or unusual hacks you've seen creators do on Teachable?
Oh man, there's so many. What I found really interesting, and we can sort of talk about like how we develop features at Teachable and so forth, is most things we end up developing start out when people are using our platform for something it's not. We've seen people use our platform for all kinds of things. Like we've seen people use our platforms for coaching, for downloadables. People have run like in-person events and conferences on our platform. And all these things like we were never quite designed for. We've had people use it as their marketing site. We actually had a school somewhere in Africa use it as their homepage, which was like their actual like student portal, which kind of blew my mind. So it's really interesting to see all the ways people are breaking our website from a product development perspective. I think like one of the best places to look for inspiration is like how people are using a product in the ways it was not intended. So we've actually been pretty inspired by that and used it frequently. One of the other things that I just like ranks up there in terms of just like hilarious uses of Teachable is there was a while back where we ended up donating a little bit of money to the ACLU to protest against the immigration ban, which we thought was just not cool. And then we had a Teachable fan, let's call it, register a school at the URL boycott and set up boycott.teachable.com and use our own platform to build a website encouraging people to not use us, which was probably my favorite use of the platform thus far.
I have to say, that's pretty clever.
Yep. I think it's still live, boycott.teachable.com. I don't think he's gotten much traction though, but it's still out there.
Okay, well, people can check that out, but then maybe visit regularteachable.com too if you want to learn something a little more productive. But it is fun to see what different people do. And now with, you know, I think it is 100,000 creators on the platform, it's really exciting to think about what they'll continue to do next. And that is what I want to talk about. So I want to get a little bit bigger picture. You often share thoughts internally at all company meetings or even more publicly on Twitter about the knowledge economy. So maybe for listeners who haven't heard the term before, can you quickly just tell us what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. The entire company, like, right, our entire business is predicated on this assumption that was considered crazy a few years ago. It's still a little crazy, but I think people are like warming up to the idea. But like, I strongly believe more people in the future will create a business, become entrepreneurs by selling their knowledge, by, selling a product created by their mind. Historically, you built a business by like either like growing things and selling it, or like manufacturing things or selling it. And even now, most businesses revolve around the sale of physical objects. In the future, I think far more people will sell their information, sell their knowledge, sell their expertise. So that was sort of the bold bet Teachable was predicated on, that there would be, millions of these knowledge entrepreneurs selling their information in some way, shape, or form, all of which now is, comprises the term knowledge economy, which is just people making money from their information. And at Teachable, that's always been our bigger mission. Courses were sort of how we started and our first foray into this world. But thinking like 10 or 20 years from now, we want to empower millions of people to make money from their information, knowledge, experience. And we're only getting started.
Mm-hmm. And as you hinted at, this is obviously much bigger than just courses. And that's something that we have been talking about behind the scenes for a while. So just this month, in June 2020, when this episode is released, we just unveiled a complete rebrand for Teachable, but it goes far beyond the colors, even though those look great too. So can you share the news with listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. We're super excited, right? For the first 6 years, Teachable was the platform for online courses. Today, it now becomes a platform for online courses as well as coaching. Coaching right now is just when a creator wants to train or mentor people individually. In some ways, it's a massive paradigm shift. In others, it's not massive paradigm shift, because like we go from like this one product company to a two product company. But it's not a massive shift because, again, we found that a lot of creators were already doing this. Like a lot of our audience is already doing this, either on Teachable or off Teachable. And it's also, to me, a very logical extension of like our broader mission, where for a lot of creators, creating an online course takes a ton of time. You have to basically do two very difficult things when you create a course. You have to like create this like living, breathing product that could take a couple of months, and you have to learn how to sell it. With coaching, you now don't have to create anything upfront. You just sell it. So it like reduces the difficulty by almost like half. And we found that a lot of creators start out their journey with coaching. And on the other end of the funnel, a lot of creators that have large courses also sell very high-end coaching on the other side of it. So for us, it was a logical extension of our platform. And I can't tell you how excited I am for it, since we've been working on this for maybe 3 years. I think since you started, Melissa, we've been talking about products beyond courses. So.
Yeah, I think almost a full 3 years we've been talking about this and kind of just hoping and wishing. And I know we're all, like you said, so excited to see how people start to use it. And maybe just to be really obvious about this, what is coaching and how is it different from a course? You started talking about it, but I want to be really clear, because maybe that term coach, people think, oh, like a sports coach. Or on the other hand, they think, oh, don't you have to be accredited? Isn't that this whole thing? So can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So coaching, so I think it's easiest to consider an example, right? Like let's imagine you have a writing class, a copywriting course or whatever. In a copywriting course, you would upload your content, have, 1, 10, hundreds of students going through it. No matter how many students you have in it, there's not that much additional work per student, but consequently, it's a lower price. Now, if you became a writing coach, on the other hand, you would get a client who would work with you, and you would establish a plan based on their goals. And there would be sort of one-on-one check-ins, milestones to hit, and you're ultimately like guiding them in a much more hands-on way. Again, the advantage here is if you're a writing coach, you don't have to create the content the way you would have to create a writing course. You can have your credentials, you can sell your coaching service, and then as you're working with someone, that's sort of when the content development happens. The other advantage of being like a writing coach in this example is, let's imagine you're a writing coach for 3 to 4 people. You get started, you work through your process with them, you sort of figure out what's working and what's not working, and you can then convert that into a course, having already taken people through that process. So very often coaching is a great place to start developing your content that you can then refactor and sell as an online course, and already have the validation that you've taken people through your methods, they've gotten results, and there'll be testimonials for your course as well.
I think that word validation is kind of the whole point, right? You're validating your ability to sell. So much earlier in this episode, you talked about really refining your offer and finding the right fit for your audience. And so with coaching, you could try even selling a couple versions of a skill that you have and seeing if one lands better than the other. And then you can actually test your methods of teaching or coaching somebody. And I think for a lot of people just getting started, it's going to be a really great choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our goal, like from our end, right? Like, how will Teachable decide if coaching is successful for us? The biggest thing we're looking to improve is, can we get more people to their first sale? Like internally, that's our kind of magic metric. Like, what percentage of customers get to their first sale? And the secondary metric is how fast they get to their first sale. So for coaching to be successful, we would like to see far more people make their first sale. Encouragingly, we've seen the median time between someone publishing a coaching service and getting a sale is right now 1 day. So if that stays up, that's massive, because typically we're like at 45 days between someone getting their first course sale. So we're already seeing it's much quicker to get coaching sales. Now, how many more people can we get to that first sale mark will determine how successful this is.
I love that you brought up the time to first sale, because since we are kind of taking a peek at what we think about at Teachable, I don't know if that's something that maybe listeners would have guessed, but we're always thinking about how we can help creators get to the first sale faster, or asking what kind of tools they need to better their own businesses, because you're all our clients in a lot of ways. And so we're always asking these big questions. And I think this is maybe the biggest new thing that we've rolled out in quite some time.
Since I've been a young man. So this is, yeah, I'm super excited.
Mm-hmm. You did hint at this too, but how do you think this will affect our creators and just their overall ability to earn money in that knowledge economy that we've been talking about?
I think this is a big step, but this is far from the last step in thinking about products beyond courses, right? Like right now, our focus is on one-on-one coaching. And again, I think it'll help beginners get started and make sales initially. I think it'll help expert course creators make more money from their most engaged audience by having like super advanced specialized training. At the same time, like our roadmap is a lot bigger than this. Like we also see an opportunity to like start rolling out group coaching, because right now everything revolves around one-on-one coaching. And group coaching, again, is a hybrid between like being a one-on-one coach and an online course, which is fully self-serve. So we're excited about that. But also as we think about the entire gamut of what knowledge products are, right now we help people do memberships, but can we do that a little bit better? Right now there's a lot of people who use Teachable for in-person events, at least pre-Rona. And can we do that better? So when we think about our broader mission, like we want to help people make money from their knowledge and experience in lots of different ways. And coaching is one very, very significant step, but there's many more to come.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really exciting to think about the future and even just the different options that we'll be able to provide for creators. But before we talk more about the future, what do you think are maybe some of the biggest misconceptions that people might have about earning in the knowledge economy?
I think something a lot of people are a little concerned about, or at least they think more about it than we do, is this idea of accreditation. And it's a little controversial, right? Because like accreditation exists for a reason. Our philosophy is like death to accreditation. Like, yes, accreditation does serve some purpose, but I think it can be equally damaging. It can equally be this thing that tells people like they're not worthy. It equally like adds barriers to people being able to teach and share knowledge. And teaching and sharing knowledge happens already in so many unofficial ways that we want to unilaterally encourage as many people to share knowledge as possible. And that does mean like accreditation does not matter to us. Mm-hmm. And that is controversial, right? Because a lot of industries are more regulated. We believe that there's more upside by letting more people teach than there is by having accreditation being this unnecessary barrier that a lot of people have to jump through. And I also don't think it's a very efficient barrier, because really accreditation just means you're paying a third-party agency money to go through whatever they want you to. It's not like you're learning most of those times. You're just filling out forms and, copying answers from somewhere and so forth. So we're anti-accreditation. We believe that like everyone should have a platform to teach. And unless it's like straight up like illegal or highly offensive, we'll let you do that. And as a result, more people will teach, more people will share their opinion, which in turn will mean more people will learn, because we found that people want to learn from people like them. So the more teachers, the more learners. So our goal is to like just maximize that side of the equation and see what happens.
I'm glad that you brought up people wanting to learn from people like them, because I think we talk about this like myth of this expert, or whether it's accreditation or having to have all these degrees or all this experience, thinking that you have to be like the number one best person ever at the thing that you do in order to teach or now coach on it. But maybe you can talk more about that, because we've just continued to find that it's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, as you mentioned, a lot of people, that's the biggest challenge we deal with, is people feeling like they're not enough, they're not worthy, they're not enough of an expert, almost this like low-key imposter syndrome of, who am I to teach? And what we found continually is people are not looking to learn from the expert. They're not looking to learn from the person like super far along. What people are looking to learn from is people they relate to, people that like, for whatever reason, they connect with, which is why we believe more teachers, the better. And even think about in our daily lives, right? Like chances are that we learn more from like a parent or an older sibling, sometimes younger sibling, than a lot of other perceived authority figures that might have more, specific knowledge. And then multiply that by all the possible creators. Like we found like, our top programming instructors, for instance, are not professional programmers. They just connected with an audience because they kind of had similar struggles learning how to code. Multiply that with everything. Multiply that with people who remind you of you because you guys might look alike, like might serve as a better role model for that reason. Think about people whose learning style or teaching style you just connect with. So my advice to people is always don't like worry about not being the biggest expert. Chances are you're the perfect teacher for a specific type of person. So go ahead, teach, and like find those people.
Great advice. Now, kind of thinking about the future, but also very much the present, 2020 has been a very unusual year in business. I think it's safe to say the least. So what has 2020 been like for Teachable?
Yeah, 2020 has been completely bizarre in every single way, right? We started the year super like excited, gung ho, everything like big year, lots was happening. I mean, very confidentially at the time, we're already in talks to merge our business with Hotmart, which is the Brazilian company doing the same thing kind of we do, but on a global scale, with the idea that we believe it's an international world out there and we have to capitalize on it. We announced this deal and immediately went into a 3-month lockdown, which was super fun. But the lockdown was really interesting because on the one hand, typically when people sell a company, merge a company, there's time to kind of take a breath, think about how far you've come, celebrate as a group. But instead, what happened is the world went on lockdown and everyone had to rapidly adjust to this world of online education. So we had our busiest like 2 or 3 months right after announcing our acquisition, but it really kind of heightened our mission. I know this sounds like very cliched and very corny, but like I think for me definitely, and for most people working at Teachable, it kind of was like validation in some sense that this thing we've been talking about for so long is like accelerating, but also like what we do matters. What we do like actually is having an impact on, thousands, tens of thousands of teachers and millions of learners. So from that sense, it was weird because like, yeah, I was personally like unhappy with what was happening and the lockdown and so forth. There's also this like weird sense of like gratitude of like doing meaningful work, which, comes and goes. But during quarantine was definitely like, this matters. And that was really cool. And I would say the last part was also this like slight sense of guilt of like the fact that just our business was doing better and thriving as the world was falling apart around us. And that's accentuated, frankly, with time. But I think it was also kind of cool to see the entire company feel the same way, step up and do what we can to help out in the tiny, tiny ways we could.
And I know you mentioned the business doing really well, but it wasn't just our business. Like, yes, we saw really incredible numbers of people using Teachable, but we also saw insane growth for students taking courses. I mean, it was literally off the charts.
Yeah, like a lot of people who bought courses for like months ago, years ago, came back, started taking their classes. A lot of in-person businesses rapidly adjusted to online education. A lot of people, when faced with like the lack of income, like very quickly started making money online. In our little bubble of the internet, it was a very, very optimistic time. Still is, frankly. It basically accelerated the trend of like people moving to online classes. I would say 5 to 7 years. Like, so it was really, really cool to just see sort of how well our creators started doing. I mean, for context, like in February, before we went into lockdown, our creators made about $24 million or so. This month, which is June, they'll probably be over $45 million or so. So they've doubled their earnings in a span of 4 months, which is ridiculous. Like, we would have been happy to do that in a year. And it doesn't seem like it's slowing down. So it's been inspiring to watch.
It really has. And even bigger, I know you're looking not just at the knowledge economy, but kind of broader picture. How do you think the overall pandemic is going to affect the future of business, or maybe even the future of business online?
Yeah, so my thesis, right? There's basically two kind of viewpoints on this. One viewpoint is like, this is a weird time in the world. As soon as like either there's a vaccine or a treatment, things will bounce back to normal and it'll be like nothing happened. The other viewpoint, which is the one I have, is there will be a vaccine. Things will move back to normal, but certain trends will be forever changed. Like certain like movement, like the impact of some activities, not new activities, things that were happening before but that have been accelerated, are here to stay. As an example, like, telemedicine, remote work, online education, the creator economy. I think all of these like little slices of the internet, also just e-commerce in general as a category, I think this is a permanent inflection point for any of these industries. Think 100 years from now, we look back, we zoom out on the graph, and we look at this moment in time and we're like, oh, this is when this industry changed forever. So yeah, travel will pick up, other things will pick up, but I think this sort of movement to online, it's here to stay. The majority of the gains made by these industries at this point are absolutely here to stay. And that's something, again, I strongly believe. There are people that take the opposite side on this argument, but I believe our entire industry, the entire creator economy, like, will be forever positively impacted by this. On the opposite side, the full-time job economy, I think, will be forever sort of hurt by this and will look very different in the future, long after the virus is still around.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about Teachable's future specifically, what are you most excited about? Maybe a year down the road, but bigger picture too.
Yeah, a year is boring. Let's do 10 years. 10 years from now, again, it's like, again, think about this knowledge economy, right? I like think of this like utopian world with like tens of millions of people all making an income just with like their brain, their knowledge, their experiences, and selling different kinds of products. It could be courses, it could be coaching, it could be just like products that we don't even know what they're going to look like, but they're still going to be behind the idea of you have some knowledge and you're giving it to other people. And at Teachable, we want to empower all these people to earn a living. We want to also want to control the economy here, which is help them sell each other's knowledge, right? It's also like be sort of this neutral third party that is creating and facilitating these transactions. And the third thing is we want to be truly international. Like, I think, again, about 40% of Teachable today is international, but we still sort of have a very US-centric bias. The Hotmart transaction, I think, helps broaden our market a little bit, but there's still parts of the world where we have basically no footprint. And I want us to think about this as like, international first company that facilitates transfers of knowledge, like just across the entire world. I think that's really cool too, because as an immigrant, I firmly believe like talent and opportunity are not equally distributed. Like, I think talent is distributed everywhere in the world. Opportunity is not. And I would, like, in our long-term mission, try and sort of bridge those gaps.
Mm-hmm. And when we think about the international appeal of like online courses, or even what it looks like right now outside of the US where we're based, how does the knowledge economy look right now beyond just where we are currently housed?
Yeah. So you have China on the one hand, and China is like 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. I mean, in China, you can like microtransactions are super big. I mean, audio podcasts, or you can call them audio paid courses. Like, the entire podcast economy is so much bigger, and it's all predicated behind paying for content. You can buy books by like the page. The amount of ways you can consume and pay for information in China is 10 years ahead. So I'm going to exclude that market because, frankly, like, that's probably the one market we're not going to catch up. The rest of the world is all in like different stages of like realizing how big a thing this is. Obviously, Hotmart has a huge footprint in Latin America. India is developing very fast, more in terms of like education from like the traditional education side and credentialism, and there's still a lot of like belief in institutions there that will take some time to sort of undo. But I do think the rest of the world is sort of just catching up to this. And with each passing year, it's becoming more and more important. The other thing that's really cool though is just like enabling people from different countries to like sell to different countries and kind of earn different amounts of money. Like as an example, coaching as a service is really interesting, where there are a lot of countries where you can find a professional coach, like someone that's like very well trained to teach you for a fraction of the price, because that's just like how globalization works, right? Like the money goes much further there. And I think that is a great example of something that benefits both parties. It benefits the person in India earning $20 an hour, since it's substantially more than they would make at their day job. And it's also a really good deal for someone in America who's getting a more qualified coach at a lower price. And I think those are the kinds of things we want to enable more, and we have the opportunity to.
That's so interesting to think about. We are starting to wrap up, and I want to make sure to ask this before we go. So if you were starting an online business today, what would you do in the first month or two? And what would you just ignore altogether?
Ignore the haters.
Of course.
If I were to start an online business, I would work backwards from money. What that means is I would like figure out what I could do to get someone to pay me, have them pay me, and then like do the work. Because the biggest mistake like I've made in a lot of other businesses is like do the work first without sort of validating if someone is willing to pay for it. That's one path. And that's the path I would use if I'm like creating an information product or creating an online course or something. If I was creating a software business or another kind of business, I would also look at sort of following the Teachable template of, can I create something that I would legitimately find useful for myself? Because again, we're not special, unique snowflakes. If I find something that's kind of dope for myself, there's going to be other people like me. So I'd pick one of those two paths based on sort of what type of business I'm building. And I still think I think that's the only way of going about it, frankly.
I noticed too that you're talking about like earning money or solving problems. You're not talking about, what should I call it? What should I create first? What camera should I buy? And I think those are easy things to think about because sometimes they're fun or maybe they're easier. But at the end of the day, if somebody's not going to pay you for that knowledge, then you're going to be stuck.
The other thing I hate is when people ask me very frequently, being like, yo, like what topics are selling real well right now? Like, what are the good topics? You should not pick a topic because it's like ranking number one. Like if there's enough topics out there. Find something that you want to do, that you want to teach, that you have a personal connection and affiliation with, that you give a shit about, versus something that is perceived to be selling well. So that's again, like sort of at least my stance on things, because you're going to be doing whatever you pick for a while. Do not do it because it's quote unquote trendy right now.
Good advice. Now, wrapping things up, what are you thinking about next, maybe even beyond Teachable, and where can people stay in touch?
Cool. Very easy question. What am I thinking? I mean, again, like I think I touched on some of the key topics, but like I think we're still in the super, super, super early days of the knowledge economy. So spending a lot of time thinking about like where to from here. How do we make this as ubiquitous as possible? How do we make this not this like small niche of the internet, but how most people earn a living as step one? And step two is how do we use this to solve the discrepancy between opportunity and talent, right? So that's where I spend most of my time thinking. The best place to find me is we're at teachable.com. I'm on Twitter, probably the only social network I use, and my handle is my full name, Ankur Nagpal. We're also on Twitter at Teachable. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch.
I do have one more slightly spicy question. You asked me to ask you controversial questions. I'm not great at that. So to send us out, do you really believe that everything is teachable?
Ooh. Yeah, I do believe everything is teachable. Should everything be taught is another question. And I would say the answer is probably not, but everything is teachable. So that's a cool cop out of an answer.
Well, that was a lame answer, but I guess that's how we'll leave. So, Ankur, thank you again for joining the podcast. I hope listeners enjoy learning more about Teachable and the bigger picture direction that we're headed.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us this week and all season long. You can see the show notes for this episode and learn more about getting started on Teachable for free at teachable.com/EIT30. That's teachable.com/EIT30. On behalf of Team Teachable, we hope you enjoyed today's interview with our founder, Ankur Nagpal. Thank you again for joining me, Melissa Guller, on this season of Everything is Teachable. See you soon, creators.
This podcast is produced by Teachable, where our mission is to empower creators to transform their knowledge into income. To date, we've helped over 80,000 online business owners build and sell their online courses. And together, they've earned over $500 million and reached over 20 million students. To learn more or to start creating your own online courses for free, visit teachable.com.